Helen Graham Turner graduated from the Maryland State Normal School two-year teacher certification program in 1926. She later completed her bachelor's degree at Columbia University. Mrs. Turner taught in public education for over 40 years. These are her reflections.
Mrs. Turner, we are so appreciative that you are taking your time to talk with us today about your experiences when you were at Towson Normal School and the other things that transpired in your career after you graduated. First thing I think it would be fun to explore is the beginning, and that's sort of your childhood, your early life, where you grew up, what you were thinking about doing when you graduated from high school. So if you could tell us a little bit about where you're from.
Well, I grew up on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and my grandfather was a doctor who retired in Chestertown, Maryland. And as far as I never really thought about what I was going to do when I graduated, but I always loved to do creative things. All the magazines that came in used to have things where you could send and get this and make something, and send, get this and make something. I would send, get everything. Some of them would work and some of them wouldn't.
Well, there you go.
But then eventually when I got to high school, I learned to sew. And I made all my clothes. I loved to sew. And I thought what I really wanted to do was to be a domestic science teacher. But my father had 2 sons in college, and he couldn't send me to a 4-year college. So I landed in normal school. And you know, it's been the greatest thing in my life that I did, because what I did do was so much better than what I had planned to do, because I got into elementary education, and I loved elementary education. So, and my choices were a secretary, a nurse, or a teacher. So I couldn't be a secretary and I couldn't be a nurse. So I just became a teacher, and I landed in Towson.
You did?
Yeah.
Now that was kind of far away from home. I don't think when you went we had a Bay Bridge.
Oh no, I went to school by boat.
So you took the ferry?
I loved going to school by boat, because there would be other students going to Hopkins in different places. And there would be a whole group of students. Every time there was a holiday, there'd be a group of students going and coming. And that was a lot of fun.
So when you got to Baltimore, you still had to get yourself from...
We got off at Charles Street. I mean, we came in right by Charles Street, got the trolley to Towson, and went out to Towson on the trolley.
So you are...
So I came by boat. Well, first I came by car to the boat, and then I came by boat, and then I went by trolley.
But you got there.
But I got there.
Now, when you were at the normal school, that was a 2-year program?
Yes.
And what did that entail? I guess you took courses the first year, and then at some point you must have done practice teaching, student teaching.
Well, practice teaching was the second year.
I see.
But the first year you took more like geography and studies. But then the second year you took more practice teaching. And I remember particularly, I don't know who the teacher was. I mean, I've forgotten her name. But I remember particularly the one-room school, because I told the story in the piece that you have there, that I went out on a bus the first 6 weeks. I forget which town it was, but anyhow, the day that there were 2 of us, and the first day we went, the teacher was sick. And we had a 5th grade, and they ran away with us. And it was a very unhappy experience. And it never really got real good. And she didn't give me a good mark either. And the next 6 weeks, I spent in the one-room school.
And that was on campus?
And yes. And she was just the other extreme. She was the nicest person, and she drew me out and made me a teacher. And I don't remember her name, but I remember her. And I would never forget her because she was the one who really made me a teacher. Because she had a way of drawing you out, because as I said, I was shy. And she had a way of drawing you out that you didn't know it was in you, but she would bring it out.
That's wonderful.
So
when you finished that second practice teaching,
I got an A in her course.
Well, there you go.
But the other one I didn't. I got a very low mark. But I don't know. We just never connected.
Yeah.
But
well, that would be very hard. I mean, we have to remember that you weren't all that old. How old?
I know.
And
17, 18.
Yes. And here you were with fifth graders.
Fifth graders.
And that's about the end of elementary.
And it was the first day.
Yes.
So I had no idea what you did with fifth graders at the first.
No.
And because this was my first day of seeing fifth graders. And I think she was out for a week.
Oh, my heavens.
And by that time, the kids have no respect for you. And there's no way to change things. So that just was bad. But this other lady just changed everything and made me a teacher.
Do you remember much about living on campus? Or
yeah, I lived on the campus 1 year.
I see.
I think her name was Mrs. Held. She had a rooming house at the Four Corners, or the center of town. And there were about 6 girls there, I guess. So the first year, I roomed there.
And then, how did that go?
That was fine. We had to walk up or else take the trolley, whichever, and it was okay. We didn't mind it. And I was young then. So then the second year, I had a corner room on Newell Hall. And I had 2 roommates, I think, in the room. And one slept out on the porch and kept her stuff in the room.
Interesting.
And then we had, between that room and the next room was a bathroom. I love that because nowadays sometimes they have the bathroom down the hall.
Right. So that was pretty special.
But we had the bathroom right by our room. So and we had the corner room.
Very nice that you got the corner room.
Yeah.
All those windows.
That was nice. And the one girl, they had a sleeping porch. And she used to sleep on the sleeping porch and keep her things in our room.
That's very interesting.
So,
what kinds of things were you involved in on campus other than your coursework? What kinds of things did you do?
I remember I belonged to the campfire. I think it was a campfire. It wasn't Girl Scouts. It was I think it was campfire. And I remember we took one weekend down in Annapolis in a cabin. Of course,
interesting.
That was fun. But I wasn't involved in a lot because I was, as I say, I was more or less shy. Well, I was very shy, but I've gotten to the point where I'm not shy anymore.
It just took you a little while.
It took me 100 years to reach the point, but I'm not shy anymore.
Well, good.
Yeah.
But there were some things that everybody participated in. I mean, weren't there social events that were part of campus life? Dances.
Oh, yeah. I loved to dance. And they had dances, and I went to dances.
Now, I've heard things about a May Day celebration. Were you part of that?
We used to have May Day celebration. They had this big pole with the streamers down, and you would go around. I don't remember much about it, but I remember the May Day celebration, and they had the pole with the streamers, and I guess we sang May Day songs and stuff. Yeah, we used to do that. And I think in sports, I think we had, it was a ball, where you kicked the ball.
I don't know what that would be.
I forget what it was.
Did you do field hockey?
I guess that's what it was.
Maybe so.
Field hockey, because I think you kicked the ball. I don't know, but I know we had a lot of.
And were you invited to the president's house ever? The president lived on campus.
Yeah, I remember Lida Lee Tall.
And she was your president.
She was the president.
I would think that
no. But one time I went to a dance, and Lida Lee Tall's granddaughter or something got me a boyfriend to go to the dance.
Well, that was good.
My boyfriend got out the last minute, and I didn't have a date. So I don't know how I came to have her get me a date, but she got me a date.
Did it go okay?
Little bit, but he had a little too much to drink, I think.
I see.
But, and I was afraid she would see me.
Well, and it was sort of connected to Lida Lee Tall, so that was a little scary.
I don't, it was her.
Somebody connected to her.
I think it was her granddaughter. It must have been. I mean, it couldn't have been her daughter.
I don't know.
So it must have been her granddaughter. But I'll never forget that.
So you're coming to the end of your time at the normal school, and you've had your good practice teaching experience with this wonderful mentor, teacher. And are you feeling fairly confident at that point about becoming a teacher?
I wasn't too confident. I guess I was always a little bit shy and starting in teaching and everything. And then I had no trouble getting a school. I got this school. It was called Felton.
But you went home. You didn't stay in the Baltimore
I lived
area.
at home and drove a car, except in wintertime. I guess 3 months in wintertime, you know, in the country, the roads were so that you couldn't drive a car.
So how'd you get to school?
So I stayed at the farmhouse, which was on the corner. My school was on the corner of the farmhouse. And I stayed at that farmhouse during the week. And my uncle would come in the milk wagon with 2 horses to pick me up on Friday and to bring me back on Monday morning. And he always built my fires, and he always put them out on Friday.
So you had that kind of heat in your school?
I had, I guess, coal fires, I guess.
I don't know.
Yeah. I had a big stove in the middle of the room. And Uncle Willie used to build it for me Monday morning. And I had a very tall student in 8th grade. I'd say it was one-room school with all grades.
Oh, my heavens.
And this one student would keep my fire all week for me. And then Uncle Willie would put it out before we left on Friday. So, but I lived at the farmhouse all winter. And Uncle Willie would come and get me on Friday and keep me till Monday and bring me back.
Amazing.
Then when the roads got so you could drive, I drove my father's car. And that's when I bought my car that spring, I think. But I guess it was about 8 or 10 miles from my home
Uh-huh.
that I taught.
Now, how did you know how to drive when you bought that new car for yourself?
I don't even remember, but my father taught me how to drive.
Ah.
And I don't ever remember taking a test, but I asked a friend of mine that was my age what we did as far as taking the test. And she said she took a test at Chestertown. Well, Chestertown's not in my county. I don't know why she took it in Chestertown. It would be Centerville for me. So I don't remember taking the test, but I guess I did. I guess you had to take a test.
Well, you had a license.
Oh, yeah, I got
So-
I don't remember getting it, but I remember having it, and I still have it to this day.
That's wonderful.
16 years old.
Wow.
So, and I don't remember my father teaching me to drive, but he must have,
He must
because I
have.
couldn't drive unless he did.
Right. And you were driving his car for
I was
a while.
driving his car.
I'm sure he
The
taught
first
you how
year.
to drive.
Yeah. And then the second year, why, I bought my own.
Amazing.
I think it was $360. Either 300 or 600.
And it was a Ford
It was that little one that's in my
in your room.
room. Yeah, a little Ford Roadster. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Oh, I thought that was the neatest car ever.
Absolutely. In your class, you had a one-room schoolhouse. You had students.
8 grades.
8 grades. Oh my Lord! How did you ever manage that?
Well, when you get to, like when I moved to Margate and had 1 grade, you have sections of the grade
Yes.
that you take separately.
Yes.
And you do the same with that. You take the first grade, then you take the second, and sometimes I remember the third and fourth had social studies together. So I guess there were maybe 2 or 3 things like that that were joined together. I had this one 8th grade boy in 8th grade by himself.
And he's the one who tended the fire
He's
for
the one
you.
that tended the fires. It was very fortunate that he was a very gentle
Indeed.
person because he was very nice. I didn't have any bad children. I had one that was very mischievous, but his mother was right on him, and she didn't let him do a thing. If he did anything wrong, she was on his neck. So I didn't have to discipline him at all. And I had very little discipline problems. But I had thought I wanted to teach in a regular school
Yes.
eventually, and so I could learn more about teaching. So my mother and my aunt got together on this, and my aunt lived in Pleasantville, and they decided that I should come up here and apply. So I applied several different places, and I got 3 jobs.
Oh my heavens.
I got Pleasantville, Northfield, and Margate. And my cousin taught in Margate, so I took the job there. And so I taught in Margate all the rest of my life.
Wow.
But I taught 5th grade the first year, and I wasn't too successful in that. And then I went to 4th, and I loved 4th grade. And I taught there until they built another school. And I wanted to go to the other school. So in order to go to that, I had to take 3rd grade. And then while I'm in 3rd grade, the principal comes to me and says, he wants an experienced teacher in 1st grade, and I'm it. So I taught 1st grade the last 15 years.
Wow.
And I loved it.
That's a hard grade because
But
everybody.
they're so cute, and they're just this way. They're all ready for anything. And nobody else has spoiled them.
Yes.
Because they didn't get spoiled in kindergarten in those days. I had 1 child in all those years that knew how to read.
Yes.
And I tried to advance her along at her speed.
Uh-huh.
But she wouldn't have it. She wanted to go with the class.
Yes.
So I had to teach her with the class. She didn't want to be separated.
No. But that means that you taught lots and lots of children how to read.
Well, at one time they said 1,200.
Whoa.
The Board of Education told me 1,200, so I don't know. I never counted them, but the doctors and all the doctors and lawyers and restaurant people and everybody around. And I'm still, whenever this goes in the paper, I still get calls and letters and cards.
Oh, I'm sure.
From students.
Yes.
And as we told you, the one came to my birthday party with an apple. And he's the one that invented that lactate stuff or something for people who can't drink milk.
Really?
Yeah, he invented that, and he finally sold that, and he's got another business. And I guess he's retired now, but he's had 2 different businesses, so I did all right with him.
You certainly did, and all those doctors and lawyers too.
Yeah.
Must make you.
And a judge retired a couple of years ago. No, he retired the year I had a 100th birthday, I think, because I got a card from him.
I see.
But it's really exciting to get all these cards. And you know, when you get to the end of the road like that, you just get such a wonderful feeling that you have taught school all these years. Now, I didn't think about it when I was doing it.
Of course not.
But after you finish and you get all this return, it just, I am so glad that I was a teacher.
Absolutely.
So, and of course I got all the beginning at Towson. I loved my years at Towson. I had wonderful friends. They're all gone.
Now, you said that when you came to Margate to teach, that's where you stayed. In the process of your teaching there, you got married.
Yeah. But
And
you
when
know
did
what?
when did that happen?
Well, I'll tell you that in a minute.
Okay.
But when I went to Margate, when I came up here, I really wanted to come up to a school like that to learn more.
Yes.
But do you know I had more supervision in my country school than I had in the Margate school?
Did you really?
Of course, he walked up and down the hall past my door, but he didn't come in.
Really?
But in my one-room school, she would come around and she'd stay a half a day every few months. So she really knew what was going on there.
Yes.
But now, what was the other?
Oh, I said at some point in your career you get married.
Oh, yeah, well, that was, there's a long story in between because
Okay.
the first year that I had vacation, I stayed home, and I was bored to tears because I stayed home all summer on the farm. And so after that, every year, I used to go to summer school, but I didn't start out to get my degree. I just started out for fun. And my father thought traveling was waste of money. But if you go to summer school and get education, that was wonderful. And I was still obeying my father at that time. So the first year I went to University of Maryland, and then after that I went to University of Virginia and Wisconsin.
Oh, my heavens.
And after one of those, I went to Columbia.
Yes.
And then when I think I went to Columbia before I went to Madison. And then I went to Madison. And then I wrote to Columbia to get them to put my points together because Columbia was the closest to me down here. It was easy for me to get to New York. And so they fixed up my points and told me how many I needed.
Yes.
So then I went to Columbia every summer for 6 summers.
Oh, okay.
So I had done all this, and there wasn't anybody around to marry. There weren't any men around at all. And finally I had met Art, and but it was a couple years after I had met him. His family had a restaurant in Margate, and they also had a laundry in Pleasantville.
Uh-huh.
And his parents had died.
Oh, my heavens.
But he lived with his uncle. His uncle raised him.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was in the family business and all that. So I met him. We were walking to the trolley, and a friend of mine introduced me to him. And it was a couple of years after that before I really started going with him.
Mm-hmm.
He came down to the apartment with another guy for some of the girls, and then he asked for a date. And once he asked for a date, I had a date every week. We met in September. I mean, we started going together in September. We married in June.
There you go.
And before that, nobody married and stayed.
Stayed in teaching?
But it just happened. You couldn't teach and be married.
Oh, you could not?
At Margate.
You
I don't know
couldn't.
about other places. But it just so happened that year, it had nothing to do with me, but that year they had made the rule that you could teach and be married.
Oh, truly.
So when I got married, there was no problem.
And what year was that you got married?
1938.
So you started a whole new regulation. They didn't want to give you up.
Well, I taught until 42, and I had my son, and I...
well, you couldn't teach if you had children. You certainly...
Well, I didn't... I went out in 42, and I stayed out and had Nancy at 45.
Uh-huh.
And I guess I went back 48, because she was 3 years old, I think, when I went back, and my neighbor next door took care of her while I was in school, until she started school. But my husband was, his office was near this school in Pleasantville, so I didn't have any problems there. If anything would happen with the children in school, they always had him right there. But because I was over in Margate. But it was wonderful. And then the ride over the meadows every morning was, you didn't have any traffic, you just went over there. You had traffic, but not much.
Not like this.
And it was so lovely riding over the meadows every morning and every night. So it was a fun thing. I loved my teaching in Margate.
So you stayed a first grade teacher for
until the end,
duration.
1972. And I've been retired ever since 1972. And my husband died in 1986. So I've been 27 years, I think, alone. And I've lived alone all that time. But then a year and a half ago, I moved here.
So you stayed in your house?
I stayed in my house
until
a year and a half ago.
My heavens.
And I had a garden and everything, and so. But I belonged to clubs and had lots of friends, and so I thought, well, after he died, I could do one of two things. I could sit down and moan, or I could pick myself up and make a life of my own, because the rest of my life was up to me. I had no idea how far I was going, because there are a couple of things I would have done to the house if I'd known I was going to live in it that long.
Yes.
But I thought, oh, I'll only live here a few years. I won't do this and I won't do that. But
and you were wrong.
And I was wrong. But I had wonderful neighbors. Pleasantville is a mixed group, you know, of people and all, but they were wonderful neighbors. They all watched out for me.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
I'm sure you were a very special part of the community.
So, and I had a garden right up until I was 100.
Did you really? And what did
Yeah.
you grow in your garden?
Everything.
Was this vegetables or
yeah,
flowers?
vegetables.
Or
Tomatoes, lima beans, string beans, onions, everything that I wanted to eat. And flowers, lots of flowers. So anyway.
Helen, what haven't we talked about? What have we forgotten that you would like to share with us about Towson or about your life generally? Haven't mentioned your grandchildren.
Well, I don't see them very often. Well, my grandchildren, yeah. They're all grown and well into business and all. And they travel and all. And two of them, Melissa, who lives in North Carolina, and Scott, who lives in North Carolina, come up to New York on business. And when they come up to New York on business, they get a casino bus and they come down and see me for a couple hours. And then they go back on the casino bus and mind their own business after that. And Lindsay lives in Washington, so she drives every so often down to see me.
How nice.
And they keep in touch. But I have two little great-grandchildren, Scott's children, that I never see because they're in North Carolina. And up until well, there have been 2 Christmases that I haven't been with the family. But up till that, I've been with the family for a week every Christmas.
Wow.
So I've been close to them that way. And then when I had the house, Nancy and Michael, Nancy's my daughter, they used to come down all the time. But now then I don't have the house anymore, so they have to stay at a hotel or something. And they just come down when they're needed.
Right.
She was down for my birthday, Nancy and Lindsay. So.
Do you have any student stories that you'd like to share with us? Anybody who stood out in your teaching career, which was quite long? And
well, I don't know. I had some wonderful students.
Well, you've said the doctors and
but
lawyers
it's been so
and a
long
judge.
that I taught them.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
A good point.
But now, but I've been getting all these different letters and phone calls. I got a letter from one in Florida that they have a business in Boca Raton, I think, and she said that I was one reason she was a success because one day she was staying to finish something in the classroom. And I said to her, you know, you'll always be a success because you never let anything go. You always finish whatever you start. Well, I didn't know I ever said that. But I did. They're always, somebody's always telling me something I said or did.
Well, that's the special relationship of a teacher.
It's funny.
It's wonderful. It's rewarding to hear this.
And then I have this friend in Margate that I taught her daughter, and she's my daughter's age. And she is retired, and she goes to Florida, and she goes to New England and all. She lives in Margate. But when I'm doing my knitting and crocheting, she finds all my mistakes and fixes them for me. And if I want wool, she'll buy me wool, and she gets me started on things, and she sort of oversees my work that I'm doing that way. I can't do too much because I really can't see what I'm doing. But I can do a lot by feel. So like Joe said in the hall, why aren't you doing my my
Scarf.
scarf?
You'll get to it.
Yeah. Well, it's this far along now.
Well, that's a good start.
Another 2 weeks and it'll be done.
There you go.
Yeah. Because I spend a lot of the morning, I spend doing that. Oh, and that they gave me my family gave me a Bose radio. And oh, it has the most beautiful sound. So I crochet or knit and listen to that. And all day, I have that Philadelphia station that has, all day long, it's symphonic, and at night, it's jazz, I think. It's symphonic and jazz. And then they stick some news in between. So I keep it on that most of the time. But it's a lovely, lovely station. So a lot of the morning, I get up and get my breakfast and I walk the halls every morning. It's a third of a mile. I have what do you call it?
A walker?
The thing that measures.
Oh, a pedometer.
Pedometer. And it says it's a third of a mile. And I'll tell you, by the time I get back to my room, I'm tired. And so then I usually knit and listen to the radio until lunchtime. And sometimes I have visitors in the morning, and sometimes I have them in the afternoon. I have a lot of visitors. And my friends come in to play Rummy Cube.
And I'm sure you have many friends.
I love to play Rummy Cube. So
pretty good at that, huh?
I can't see very well, but they're big numbers. Yes. So,
Helen, there's one thing that I would like to ask you, and that's what kind of wisdom would you share, or what kind of advice would you give to someone who's considering being a teacher, having a career in teaching? What would you say to someone who is thinking about it?
First place, they should like children.
I would think that would be important.
Yes, and get a good education. And enjoy it. Because I enjoyed my teaching career. Because you do the same thing every year, but you have a different crew to do it with.
You do.
And it's entirely different. One year has no relation to another one at all, because the children are so different. Well, the things that I loved so much, I liked reading, and I loved art. Loved to, because you give them an idea, and they just go to town, and you get so many different things, so many unusual things that it's just wonderful. I really enjoyed my teaching.
So it was a rewarding career, and
it was a very rewarding career. You always have problems, but you just have to solve them and get good advice. When I was first started, I had some problems in my 5th grade, and I went to my principal, and she said, "That's your problem, work it out."
Interesting.
That's the help I got. So I had to work it out myself. And the next year, I went to 4th grade, and she never came near me to tell me I was doing better. And finally, in February, I went to her and asked her, and she said, "Oh, you're doing fine." She couldn't come to me and tell me. because I was very sensitive about it because I had so many, I had a hard class the first year I taught. I had some very hard cases to deal with. And you know something, the first class and the last class were the most challenging classes I ever had. Now that's funny.
That is.
That the last class would be.
Yes.
But I don't know. They gave me a class that was half teachable. The other half was not teachable. And I had them in groups of 2 and 3, working with them. Whereas this half, I could teach. But it's just the way things go.
Yes. And it sounds like you didn't give up after that first year in that very difficult class.
No.
So maybe that's a recommendation to young teachers is hang in there.
If you like it particularly, stick to it. And get good counsel. People. Now, there was a helping teacher who had a room at my aunt's because people had rooms in, you know, they would take a room in a house like that. And so I would ask her questions, and I wanted her to come over and watch me teach, but she couldn't do that because it was in a different place. It wasn't her place to do that.
Right.
So I'd ask her questions and all. But my principal wasn't any help. She threw me on myself, and that was, I took it and went. And I never had any more trouble.
There you go.
Until that last class they gave me.
Well, maybe that was a way of saying, maybe it's time for me to retire.
Okay.
Anything else that you'd like to share with us?
I don't really know.
Okay. Well, you've told us so much already.
Well, and there's an awful lot in that sheet.
Absolutely. Oh,
because that lady asked me so many questions, and she wrote down everything I said, and she did a beautiful job. I've never been interviewed as well as that. She did a beautiful job. And then to have the press take those pictures and put Heather. That was insulting.
Well, yes, that was unfortunate.
Yeah, it was unfortunate.
Especially
But everybody has seen the picture. I've been in the paper so much. I've been in the paper. I've been on the internet and everything so much that I guess everybody knows when the name, that.
They all knew already that you were Helen Turner.
Yeah, I think they did.
I think so too.
Well,
Helen, thank you so much for sharing part of your afternoon with us.
Well, I appreciate it very much. I'm very fond of Towson, and I loved that you saw that little red booklet that says going over old times. Yeah, well, so Towson was part of that because we landed at Towson, and a man took us in this little bus. They only had about 6 people in it.
Right.
And took us all over and of course when I was there, it was 3 buildings. And now then, it's all over the place.
Oh, and when was that? In the 1990s, I think.
It was in the 90s sometime. I don't know which year it was.
Well, sometime you have to come back and visit us again because you will not believe it.
I know.
It is just extraordinary.
To me, Towson is a wonderful university. And another thing I did, see, all the universities in Maryland, I guess, have this travel thing. So one time they sent me a thing about going to England and Ireland because they were going to Lord Baltimore's beginnings. And because University of Maryland went over every summer and helped them rebuild the buildings and all. So Nancy and I went on that trip, and that was a lovely trip because we got in places nobody else has ever done.
Mm.
I had lunch in the House of Lords.
Did you really?
And I've never heard of anybody that had lunch in the House of Lords, but Nancy and I did. Because when we went over, in Ireland, we were entertained by the, because we were on this university thing, we were entertained by the, our hosts were the Historic Society of Ireland, and they took us to all these castles. We had dinner in a castle every night.
Oh, my heavens.
And met these people and their neighbors and all. We met the Irish people. And then when we got to England, we went to the, we had lunch there, and what else oh, and in Ireland, we had tea at the embassy, and we met the father George Bush's aunt.
Oh, okay.
She was visiting the embassy, and we got into a lot of places that we never would have.
Right, if you'd just been a
if
tourist.
we'd just gone on tour.
Yeah.
So, and that it was related to the universities, because I think all the universities, well, I don't know, there's Towson and University of Maryland, I don't know.
Sure.
What else?
Salisbury.
Well, Salisbury was a little bug when I went to Towson.
But Towson was only 3 buildings, so everything's grown.
But it was a well-founded school.
It certainly was.
Whereas
and still is.
Salisbury was just a little bit. But
well, I'm glad that you have had the opportunity to do some special things like travel with Towson. And I understand that you appreciate that, but I want you to know that Towson University really appreciates you too.
Well, I appreciate that, because and they've always been so nice to me every time I've been in contact with them, or the time that we visited them. It was such a lovely trip, that over memory lane, because we went to Easton and all down the shore there, and then we went over to Annapolis, and then we went to Towson and all around. And I was raised right near Washington College. It's only 12 miles from where I lived, but I didn't go there. Well, of course, they were a 4-year thing, and I couldn't go to a 4-year. I had to go to a 2-year.
Right.
So, but well, you know, children don't like to go to the place that's near them. Now, my grandchildren grew up at the University of Virginia, but they didn't go there.
No.
They went to Virginia Tech.
Yes. But just like you, they wanted to go away from home.
They wanted to stretch out and
Absolutely.
go away from home.
Good idea.
So, but in Washington College, didn't have the kind of program I wanted anyway. I wanted teachers.
Right.
So,
well, we're glad you chose
Towson was the place to go. And as I say, I was a little girl from the country, and I didn't know very much. I learned a lot.
You did.
Yeah. And those days we didn't have, I don't know how many we had. We didn't have more than 1,000.
I think about that.
I think it was more about 1,000. I think it was 500 in Baltimore and 500 county.
But that was big in comparison to home. From
what?
That was big by comparison to where you were, where your home was. That was a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh,
by
yeah.
comparison.
Well, in those days, that was a lot. But
Indeed.
Now, how many do you have now?
22,000.
Oh, my goodness. And how many do you have in University of Maryland?
40, 35.
Oh, do they have that?
Yes.
Now, see, my brothers both went to the University of Maryland.
Sure, but they were going to go to the 4-year program, I think, and as you said, there was just money for you to do the 2-year program.
Yeah, and Towson was much cheaper than
Indeed.
that. Well, of course, they both worked
Yes.
as they went through. They had
Yes.
a pressing business.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine that now?
No.
Where the boys would get their pants pressed. So they, one brother started it, and then the other brother came along and took it over, and that's why they.
That was that was very enterprising of them to
Yeah.
think of doing that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Anything else?
I can't think of anything else.
Well, we really
I
appreciate it.
I loved having to go across the bay to
Right.
college.
Right.
That just sort of put a little zing to it.
Sure did.
Because there were kids on there that were going to Virginia colleges and Maryland colleges and all kinds of colleges. And every holiday there would be this great big bunch of kids going and coming.
Right.
And you got to meet a lot of
Yes.
kids that way. It was fun. But I loved going back and forth on the boat.
Well, sometime we'll get you maybe across the Bay Bridge, not on a boat, but in a car, and you can come and see what
I don't
22,000
know. I
students look
sort
like.
of think I'm finished traveling. Because as long as I'm here and behave myself, I'm not giving anybody any trouble.
There you go.
But if I try to do too much,
Uh-huh.
then you get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, they're so good to me here that I just
Yeah.
think, because now I was sick, I had bronchial pneumonia for about 3 months, from September, October, November. And I thought I'd never get back because I had no strength.
Mm-hmm.
And since I've gotten back and gotten into doing other things, I'm very, very careful because I don't want to get that again.
Right. Well, Helen, if you're not going to come visit us, can Ann and
Then you can come and visit me.
Great.
You can come visit me anytime, and they'll make you welcome.
They certainly did today.
Yeah.
Everybody knew as soon as we walked in
Oh,
the
yeah,
door
everybody in
why
here.
we were here.
Everybody
and that was
knew
to do
you
an
were coming.
interview with Helen Turner, class of 1926, 106 years old.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.